Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I'm going to tell you what I think about Holy Priest going into the new Dragonflight expansion for Mythic Plus. I've been playing Holy Priest a decent amount, and now that I've got to see a couple weekends of Mythic Plus testing, I'd like to think I have a pretty decent understanding of the class. I actually really like the options in the Holy Tree, and I think they did a great job of keeping what made Holy Priest strong in Shadowlands, while giving you a few new options and removing some of the less fun stuff. If you aren't familiar with Holy Priest, I think most would describe it as a straightforward healer. Your buttons mostly move health bars up in a very reactive way. Holy Priests are not super cooldown reliant, more just a constant stream of managing your mana and short cooldown abilities. Holy Priest excels when it can just plant and pump consistent healing into one or two group members, but it can sometimes struggle with quick group-wide damage, especially if there's movement involved. Let's dive into what's changing with Holy Priest going into Dragonflight. The big one will definitely be losing flash concentration. Although FC was very strong, I think I speak for a lot of Holy Priests when I say that playing around it was definitely frustrating. Replacing it is now going to be Lightweaver, a talent which is a more lightweight version of flash concentration. It isn't nearly as powerful, but to me that's a good thing. It's not nearly as punishing if you mess it up, and it also doesn't feel mandatory to take all the time. Another really cool end-tree talent is Divine Word. This allows you to empower the next Holy Word spell once every minute, giving you some sort of a bonus corresponding to the ability. Right now, the offensive buff used with Chastise is absolutely nuts. It gives a straight 50% damage boost to all of your damage for 15 seconds. This allows some crazy combinations with all of your other abilities, and possibly might even work with trinkets and other things depending on how it's tuned. This ability gives Holy Priest the ability to do some of the strongest single target damage in the game, and makes a case for it possibly being one of the top key meta healers again in Season 1. Even if you aren't as much of an offensive healer, there are still some other good options to be taking as well. Miracle Worker, which was previously a PvP talent, is now available for PvE at the end of the tree. It gives a second charge of Serenity and Sanctify. Throughout the tree, there are also many passive nodes littered about that boost the strengths of your holy words, as well as smaller spells like Renew or Prayer of Mending. You have a lot of choice in your playstyle, depending on which nodes you end up taking. As a high key pusher, I almost always found myself taking as many damage nodes as possible. Instead, if you wanted healing, for example, though, there's at least 6 different nodes that buff Prayer of Mending alone. Options like these are good if you don't care as much about damage and are just trying to raise your HPS and mana efficiency. There are also a few weird things in the class tree that you are getting from the other pre-specs. Notable spells include Twist of Fate, Shadow Fiend, and Mind Games. The end of the class tree is the only part that I really dislike about the Holy Priest setup right now. As a priest, you feel squishy, and you definitely prefer to take some of the defensive nodes to help you live through some of the harder mechanics. However, almost all the good defensive nodes are at the very end of the tree, competing with really strong and fun HPS and DPS options, stuff like Mind Games, Holy Word Life, as well as Void Shift. One other downside is utility. Priests got the short end of the stick in this expansion, being the only healer that doesn't receive the ability to get an interrupt in their talent tree. On top of that, Priests also lost Shining Force, and instead got some Void Tendril Root spell. Personally, I don't think this will make or break the class, and if anything, the lower utility just means more time to concentrate on your main rotational stuff. This is a bit more frustrating for the pug life though. When you're playing with randoms and you have less coordination, it's always good to have another knock or a kick, even if it's not necessarily needed. I know this will bum out some priests, but with the great HPS and DPS that Holy's putting out right now, I don't think it should be too big of a concern. The Holy Priest tier set is pretty straightforward, like many of the other tier sets in Season 1. It reduces the cast time of your heal every time you press Prayer of Mending, and then it also gives you a crit buff when your holy words come off cooldown. It's worth noting that the crit buff works on all priest spells, so it's one of the few tier sets that actually helps with your damage and your healing. This isn't something you really play around though, it's just a nice throughput increase once you pick up the set. One thing I do want to point out is that Holy Priest is in sort of a weird situation right now. I would say it's outshined by Druid and Mistweaver in terms of like overall just healing output, but it doesn't have the powerful protective cooldowns that a class like H-Pal or Disc Priest has. It's sort of in the middle of everything, and on top of that, it seems like Holy Priest is getting a little bit more button bloat in this expansion, where normally you think it's kind of a simple healer. You'll find yourself needing to set up quite a few extra keybinds. The biggest attribute that Holy Priest brings right now to dungeon groups is actually its insane single target DPS. You can burst down bosses quickly and contribute a lot to the speed of the dungeon. This is good in terms of Holy Priest becoming one of the stronger potential healers in high keys, but it's definitely drifting away from the sort of archetype that people might expect for Holy Priest. It's becoming less simple and more damage oriented, so I can see it turning off some people once they start to get to the point of mastering the class. I don't want to scare you away though, because it's still a very straightforward traditional healer. You have various spells that make your allies' health go up, and if you're looking for that sort of traditional, normal healing playstyle, Holy Priest is definitely a top pick. But with all the meta talk and changes aside, how did I actually like it? How did it feel to play? I think besides all the extra keybinds, it does really stay true to what Holy Priest has been in past expansions. I also, like I said, really love the choices that you have. You can really define your playstyle in terms of what are the capstone nodes that you want to take. I know some people aren't happy that Power Infusion is coming back, but personally I think it's actually pretty fun, and it's a good way to stay aware of what's going on with what your team's doing so that you can use it just at the right time. I will say that Holy Priest feels a little bit less overpowered than it did in Shadowlands, the end of Shadowlands at least. I do need to plan out my globals a bit better. I can't just spam heal, heal, heal to get through like heavy burst damage. I also really like the DPS additions to the class. It isn't mandatory, you don't have to take them. However, I think it's a really cool new option if you feel comfortable with your healing throughput. All in all, Holy Priest personally isn't my preference for a healer. I prefer something with a bit more mobility that allows me to cast on the move, to bob and weave through mechanics while not losing my rotation too much. But that's just my opinion. There are definitely a ton of fans of Holy Priest out there for sure. And that wraps up my thoughts on Holy Priest for healing Mythic Plus and Dragonflight. It was a bit all over the place, but Holy Priest is definitely becoming a more in-depth spec, so I wanted to cover what was really changing. I hope this information helped you. If you're looking for more Dragonflight M+ content, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm hoping to reach 100,000 subs by the end of the year. Good luck with your healing adventures, and happy keying, friends. Hello friends, this is early morning no coffee growl here. Just as I was putting the finishing touches on this video, they pushed out a live update pretty significantly nerfing Holy Priest. I would say what was targeted the most was their damage. They've reduced Divine Word down to 30%, as well as some other like pretty big aura changes and just nerfs across the board to healers. Unfortunately, I don't like to be a doomer, but Holy Priest healing wasn't as strong as some of the other healers like Druid, and at the same time what really defined it was that single target damage. And I fear with these nerfs, this could be the nail in the coffin for Holy Priest's chance at being a meta healer in the first season of Dragonflight. That being said, everything I talked about in terms of how the class feels and how it plays is going to be the same, so if damage isn't your thing, or you'll still play Holy Priest through and through, I wouldn't be too worried. However, I did talk a lot about single target damage in this video, and it's looking like that might not be the case when the game goes live. That's the problem with these first impressions, but hey, you know, you live and learn. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, friends. I appreciate you, and I'll give you one more happy keying.